of you know me, and many of you have been helping our efforts locally in things that we're doing in the Tri-Valley. So today we're having this monthly meeting of ours be an immigration forum, and we've invited speakers that are going to talk about things that they see in their work in the fight for immigrant justice on the situation that we're in right now. So the way it's going to work, we're going to have four speakers. They'll speak for about 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. Please put your questions in the chat. That's how we will read out the questions from the chat, and the speakers will answer them live. So we'll do that with four speakers. And then if we have time, we hope we'll have time, we'll do a breakout of those of us in the room based on where we live. We'll have a breakout room for Pleasanton, Dublin, Livermore, and then Dublin, San Ramon. And we'll just meet in those individual rooms and talk about what we're doing in our individual cities. Okay, so at that, I will introduce our first speaker, who we're glad to have. She's made time on her vacation to be here today, so we appreciate that very much. Girsea Martinez, hope I'm pronouncing that name close to being correct, is from Indivisible National. If those of you were on the July 9th call last Thursday night, the first call of the Immigration Summer Justice Series, she was one of the organizers of that, and she was one of the moderators of that meeting. So she's Associate Director of Immigrant Defense Organizing of Indivisible National. And so we're so glad to have you speak to us at Indivisible Tri-Valley.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Girsea Martinez. I am so lucky to be speaking to you all today. When Kyoko reached out and told me about the work that you all have been doing, but also like the worries that you have about how to plan ahead for what may come next, I knew I don't care that I'm on vacation. I want to speak to these leaders because this is exactly the type of work that we need to be nurturing at this moment. So I'll also flag that I have a baby resting in the bed next to me. If she starts crying, she's going to join us. Apologies ahead of time for that. I want to speak to you all briefly because I do want to save time for Q&A. I think that that's where we get into the meat of the complexity of this issue. But I will speak to you all about the things that we can be doing right now to be prepared for what may be coming. I will tell you all about Immigrant Justice Summer, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it prepares us for election protection, which is the arc of the work with Indivisible that we're sort of thinking about, not just this moment, but also what comes next as we're heading into the midterms. So I have been with Indivisible for the past 3 months. My background is in immigrant youth organizing. As I shared on the call, I don't know how many of you all were able to join, but as I shared on the call, this for me is a family affair. I am a daughter of undocumented immigrants. And I myself have experienced some of the harms that we are fighting this day in this moment in time. These harms have been happening for decades, as long as this country has been founded. And so I say that to not have us live in despair, but to point to there's a blueprint that we can draw upon in the ways that people have been successful in protecting our immigrant neighbors and friends, and that our job is just to take step one. And so we know that the Trump administration is using immigration specifically as a place to have a conversation about who belongs and who doesn't belong. It's within immigration that we're seeing these slowly chipping away at the rights of citizenship and any sort of legal status. We saw 2 weeks ago that the Supreme Court struck down TPS. And as we shared in the statement that day, we know that these are working class folks just like you and I who are simply here under like a status that our own laws granted them, and that we know that we will not fight. We will not stop fighting until there's a pathway to citizenship for all immigrants. And but the fight that we are facing right now, in addition to the Supreme Court striking down legal protections, is also this massive expansion of detention centers across the country. We know that not only that Congress just passed $70 billion more towards the expansion of detention, towards more money. What that means is more money for detentions, more money for ICE, so that they can come into our community. And what they're testing is their ability to move into a city before anyone tries to stop them. They are trying to use immigrant communities as a testing ground to see how far they can reach. And so we know that what that means to us is that they're weaponizing DHS as the agency to do that, and that it's not going to stop. I know that a couple of weeks ago we were clapping our hands and so excited about DHS announcing that it was going to abandon plans to convert 7 out of 11 warehouses that they had bought for billions and billions of dollars. But what we're actually hearing from, for example, in places like Utah, where they had said, well, you know what, we're going to back away. That's actually not the case. So what that means is that this administration is not only trying to confuse us, but they are in a specific point where they're trying to see like how else can we like move? How else can we? They're assessing where to go next. And so what that means for us is that we need to be preparing, because we don't know in what way authoritarianism is going to come for us. But we do know there are some things that like successful campaigns share that we can right now begin to start preparing. The first is what you're actually doing right now, which is creating coalition spaces where you are coming together with other leaders in your state at the regional and state level. But what we're asking folks to do right now is focus on a hyper local approach. And what that means is organizing not just at the regional or even city level, but block by block. What that means is that we're asking our groups to focus on calling their neighbors, 2 or 3 neighbors that they would probably reach out to if they had heard like a rumor about ICE searching in their community. Who would you turn to in a rapid response scenario, like your neighbors, and start creating those relationships now, talking to them about how this is impacting your life, how you're worried about the expansion of detention centers in your community, and start creating those relationships, because we know that when we look at Minneapolis, what made them really strong and really prepared was that they had not only a coalition space where they could talk at the state level and the regional level or even the citywide level, but that they had also asked all of their leaders to develop these relationships across with their neighbors block by block, and created those relationships that can be activated to protect our immigrant friends and neighbors. So that's one of the first things that we can start doing, is like thinking about, dreaming about campaigns that sort of strengthen that relationship between our neighbors and our friends. And then the second thing that we can start doing is we can start thinking about our strengths as a group. I know that this work is heavy and it is complicated, and we'll hear from many of our speakers today who will tell us how they themselves are tackling this. I know that we're hearing from an attorney later, and even from like a legal perspective, it's such a complex and constantly shifting landscape. And we can't be experts in everything. We can't. And so what we can do right now, though, is assess, well, what are we good at? What is it that gets us up in the morning? What are the resources that we have in our back pocket? And pick a lane and get really good at that. So in a rapid response scenario, there are 2 different ways that you can help, which is like frontline response, making sure that you're like providing legal resources to people, that you're like providing an ICE watch mechanism for us to collect information on arrests. So that's one of the arcs. And then the other track is mutual aid. So maybe for you, maybe we might not be the kind of people that are going to go out in the street and blow whistles. Maybe we might not be the kind of people that are going to be as constitutional observers and record on our phone. Maybe we're the kind of people that have time, like five hours out of our week, to drive and pick up groceries, from the local pantry to the house of immigrants in our community who are maybe too scared to go out and buy groceries or send their kids to school. And so sitting together ourselves and thinking about what is it that I'm good at, what is it that I'm like comfortable and can give over a long period of time rather than just one foul swoop is what we're asking people to do and what we can do. Because as soon as you know what, I only have 5 hours to commit to this. But let me like get trained up on how I can best provide mutual aid. What kind of systems can I help create in those moments? So that's the second thing that you can do. And then so once you know what your resources are, you can make a plan. You can say, when I hear that ICE is going to come to my community, I'm going to connect with the food pantry and I'm going to connect with our immigrant neighbors, and we're going to create the systems to provide continuity of care in a devastating moment like a ICE surge. So that's the second thing that we can do. And then the third thing is we know that when tragedy comes to our cities, like we saw in Minneapolis, we're so lucky to be in a country where people want to help, where people see what's going on, and they're angry and they want to respond. And so we are a wonderful big organization with lots of visibility, with a big megaphone. And so in those particular moments, people are going to be looking to big groups like us to see, okay, so what is Indivisible doing about this? And what we can do in the meantime is prepare to receive people. And that could be as simple as like setting up a signal chat where people can click somewhere and be dropped into a waiting room where you can reach out to them and bring them into the fight. Or it could also be like maybe you are stronger and have more resources and you can start setting up training infrastructure. Maybe you want to become an expert as a constitutional observer and want to train other people. Okay, that is like the thing that we're asking people to do. Is not only to create like the systems to bring in new people, but also to train themselves so that we can train other people and expand the group of people that are going to be holding our immigrant neighbors in a moment of tragedy. So those are the three things that we can do is one, start coalition working block by block. Two, it's to create a plan and become experts at the thing that we can offer in a moment of uncertainty over a continuous period of time. And then the third thing would be set yourself up so that you can grow the circle of friends and neighbors that are going to respond in a moment of uncertainty, because this work is heavy and we're going to need other people to take the load while we rest. And so with that in mind, we developed the Immigrant Justice Summer. I'm gonna share the resources on how you can join. But the one thing that I keep hearing from folks who have been driving this fight and who are tired, they say, okay, but we're also hearing that we should be preparing for election. Like, what do we do? Do we prepare to protect our neighbors, or do we prepare to protect our elections? And to that, I say, is that if you go through the motions of preparing to protect your immigrant neighbors, you're going through the motions, all the things that you need to do to prepare to protect our elections, should we need to in the fall. And so what that means is like you're connecting with people in your neighborhood who care and will be impacted if your elections are under attack. Two, you're assessing what you can give and what you can't give in a moment of uncertainty. So, and you're very clear on that. And that'll allow you to also show up well when we're protecting our votes. And then third, if you yourself are like, if we were growing the circle of people, that means that's 2, 3 more people, 4 more people, 10 more people that you can call whenever, if a terrible case that we need to go out and show a unified, safe response to a attack on our elections. Those are the more people that you bring into the fight, into immigrant justice. People are going to be prepared to protect democracy whenever authoritarianism comes for it in any form, whether that's in the form of ICE agents, or whether that's in the form ICE agents in your streets or ICE agents at the polls. Because those are the sort of type of scenarios that we know that we're waiting for and preparing for. And I'll pause there because I know there's lots of other amazing people that are going to come talk to us. But I'm so excited to hear your questions. And I would also drop my email in the chat so that you can reach out to me and we can have one-on-one.
Okay, so the question we have is this person asking this question is
Dan, we can't hear you. At least I can't hear you.
Oh, could you speak about an upcoming advocacy program for Indivisible after the midterms, after we've been successful during the likely recapture of the House? Can you speak about upcoming programs that Indivisible will have at that time for advocacy among immigrant
Yes.
population?
That's my next homework, right? So that's why I'm here, because I want to hear about what's important for our base in this moment as we continue to plan for what's in the fall. Because I think what we are in a pivotal moment right now as a movement is that we can't continue to say ICE out without saying, okay, where do we want ICE to go? Like, what is it? What's the next thing? And so as I'm thinking about fall planning and fall advocacy efforts, we're still sort of thinking about that together, because we want it to be grounded in what our community is ready for and what our base is ready for. So that's why I'm here. I want to connect with you all and be plugged in into the statewide and regional infrastructures that you have so that I can learn from folks. But I can imagine that we're going to continue our fight to stop detention centers. We have been partnering with Detention Watch Network. We are sharing a toolkit that they've developed to help us stop the expansion of detention centers, because that's definitely going to be a continuous fight. It's not like after the elections we're going to all of a sudden solve that problem. So that's core to the work that we're doing. And then the other thing is we're going to continue to get ready for rapid response moments. But there's more that we can hold, and we need to be more clear about what is it that we want. And so the fall will be that moment where we're going to demand a brighter future, and we're going to build programming around that. And so excited to hear more about what our base needs, so that as we prepare that programming.
So it's interesting you mentioned Detention Watch Network. That's one of the partners in a local coalition we're involved with ICE, which is ICE out of Dublin. And many of the folks on the call have been involved in this fight, and we've been fighting a potential transfer of a federal prison, a closed federal prison that's been proposed to be opened as a detention center. We've been fighting that, leading that fight. And it's a difficult one because it's already on federal property. So it's different from these other warehouse opposition fights that have gone through various cities. But a question I have on this is possibly a national trend. There are two existing facilities in California that were owned by Core Civic, but they were recently, just in the last week, sold back to DHS. And are you seeing that as a trend, and what's their play in that? Are they trying to isolate themselves from local municipalities having any effect?
So they're seeing that we are winning whenever we continue the fight at a local level. They are seeing that whenever our people call up their county commissioners' offices, county commissioners also do not want a detention center in their backyard, because it's harmful not only to the community, but to the environment. So we're seeing a lot of wins with environmental pressure. So, for example, in places like Roxbury, New Jersey, where in Hagerstown, Maryland, there was a group of folks in Hagerstown Rapid Response who just led a fight to send petitions to DHS as part of the lawsuit that their attorney general was able to file to stop that warehouse from being built. And so the administration is seeing that we are using every single lever as our position as constituents. And so that they are using these different tactics that you're naming, Dan. That is that's actually a fresh trend that we're seeing. And I know that we're going to be looking to our partners like Detention Watch Network, who are the experts in this moment. And it seems like you're already plugged in then to the people that are going to be leading this fight. And we're going to continue to work with them to figure out, okay, so the administration is trying a new tactic. What do we do? But yeah, Dan, that's a awful new trend that we're seeing across the nation.
That ties into a question that Shravani is asking, that we're organizing right now to push back on this potential ICE detention center on the federal prison. And our challenge is working with local elected officials who see it as outside of their bounds, that they don't have any authority in this. But what sort of information sources, and they're even like saying they're lacking that it actually is actually going to happen. So they're saying, uh, this might not even get opened. So why are we even wasting our time on this? So what kind of information sources can we look to see how credible ICE's movements are about particular specific facilities like this one?
Yeah, so we have some of those resources on the Dismantling Detention website at Indivisible. One of them is, and you all might be familiar, but I'll say like one, this administration is making it very, very difficult for us, like data-wise, to capture information, right? But there are some people that are leading the fight that we're looking to. So, for example, one of them is these like groups of like researchers and amazing social justice activists who founded this thing called Project Saltbox,
Mhm.
and that is that we are looking to, that Detention Watch Network is looking to as like one of the places where you can see visually where things are. But I'll say that the truth is that the information is quite limited, and that the administration is making these announcements about like, oh, we're not going to do this or we are going to do this to make us confused. And so I think we can one look to these national resources and research these data sets. But what we can also do is for ourselves is start recording our own information. You're talking about detention centers, but when I think about also understanding patterns and trends with immigration as it relates to ICE agents, what we're seeing is a really successful the creation of hotlines or plugging into statewide and regional hotlines to share that information and have that be accessible to groups on the ground so that they can make decisions about where to send resources. So one way that we can help sort of build up those hotlines is ourselves doing the block by block organizing so that people know, hey, there's this hotline that if you see a cop on the street, you can call or text a picture or send a text to this hotline. And so that's not what you asked, but that's where my head went in terms of where we get information about how to move.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, great. Not sure if I see any more questions, and we do want to be respectful of your time, Girsea, so thanks for being here. Is there any final thought you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I will tell you all. So I shared at the top of the call that I grew up with two parents who were undocumented, and I lost my dad when I was 18. He went to work one day and never came back because, like many like Mexican undocumented men in this country, he was stopped and detained and then deported within a matter of weeks. And that moment was really hard because I lost my dad, but also there was no network of people that came to support me and my family. In that moment, we weren't thinking as carefully as you all are about how to support undocumented immigrants and people that are harmed by this detention system. So I'll say that in many ways, I feel like I'm healing a part of me, that 18-year-old me, every time I talk to you all, because it gives me so much hope that you are creating systems and meeting about and strategizing and spending your evenings and weekends, creating infrastructure and resources for young girls like me who right now are 18, 16 and need help and support. And so I say that to say, and I'm so grateful for you all. Um, I don't know you personally yet, but there's so much love and gratitude in my heart for the work that you're doing. And I cannot wait for us to I'll share my email address. I'll share some resources with Kyoko, but I cannot wait for you all to continue to reach out to me for any support because I know that you're doing amazing, amazing work that's going to protect so many people. And so I'm grateful. I'm leaving here with so much love and gratitude for you all.
Well, thank you for sharing that personal story, and uh, I just want to say I'm sorry for what your family has gone through, and we're trying to learn and band together and get to know people in our community and do whatever we can to protect them from that type of situation. So
No, we're gonna win. We are
yeah,
gonna win.
yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Bye,
And
everyone.
will now move on to our next speaker, Spojmie. Is it okay if you go next? Because the second speaker we have does not appear to be on the call yet at this moment. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Spojmie Nasiri, an immigration attorney working in the Tri-Valley and the Central Valley. And we want to hear from some of the cases you're working on now and how things have changed over the past year under this current administration. Spojmie.
Thank you so much, Dan, for having me. It was an honor for Kyoka to reach out. I know it's the weekend and we can all collectively be doing something more, but each one of you have it in your heart to see that this cause, we bring the voices for the unheard. So as a child of immigrants who came here in the 1980s, I cannot say that I share Gria's feeling of her father being taken, but of being separated from my own mom for about 7 years when I came to the US as a refugee. I've grown up in the Bay Area. I grew up in Concord, and I have lived in Pleasanton since 2009. So the Tri-Valley is home. And what I wanted to, Kyoka had asked me sort of to touch on what I'm seeing and what we saw before. First and foremost, we need to understand, and I'm sure many of us are aware, that approximately 86% of individuals detained by ICE are in private operated facilities, which not only under this administration is meant to deport immigrants, but also a money mechanism for many of those who have invested in these facilities. Over the course of my practice, I've been licensed since 2006. I've been practicing immigration law since 2009. When I first started out, believe it or not, I had 3 children under 3 with the bar license, but didn't know what I was going to be doing. I ended up in UC Davis, where my husband was doing a fellowship, and I needed to find something. I needed something other than changing diapers and crying babies. So I walked over to the UC Davis Law School Legal Clinic. My dear friend and colleague and mentor, Holly Cooper, was the professor and is still the immigration professor at UC Davis, who was leading the only clinic at the time in the country that represented detainees. So being barred, I would take the work home, and I had law school students helping me, and I would go to as far as San Quentin, Marysville, French Camp, Richmond, Martinez, Central Valley, you name it. I had been to every facility, including Santa Rita. And more importantly, to FCI, Federal Correction Institute. People didn't know FCI existed and what it did. They had a lot of women who they referred to as the drug mules. They were the ones that were forced under threat majority of the time to traffic drugs, and then they were detained at the facility. I would spend pretty much my whole day at the facility because it was very difficult to get in as an immigration attorney. It's like almost a dream. I think about the immigration judge at that time under Obama would come and do a hearing, an actual hearing at the facility with DHS attorney, myself, and the judge and the detainee. Again, I feel like it's just another world I'm living in, what we're in now, where we cannot even access our clients. We don't even know where they're ending up. So, not to get political, I mean, we all have heard the numbers. Maybe if you haven't, Obama deported more people in his first term than other presidents had done through second term. He just did it in a more politically correct way, to put it lightly. I remember going to FCI, and I would tell people, there's a Federal Correction Institute right here, right? People didn't know because they hid it well. And I was aware of the sexual assault because my clients would tell me. And as odd as it sounds, my heart would beat and I'd be afraid not to be with my clients, even if they were males in St. Quentin or Marysville or French Camp, but it was the guards that I could not be alone with. I would find every way to get in and get out without being there. So when we heard about all the abuse, and I'm grateful for your group and other groups are fighting to not allow FCI to turn into a detention center. So over the years, I would, I lived in Davis. I would drive from Davis to Richmond, then take BART from Richmond to San Francisco Immigration Court, and I would represent detainees. Because I wasn't fluent in Spanish, I usually had like the Cubans and Indians and other nationality, Filipinos, and so I represented. And why I shared that story is due through the UC Davis Clinic. We used to have attorneys and volunteers. We would go into the Richmond Center, Richmond Jail, or Marysville Detention Center, where the federal government paid the local sheriff's office to hold immigrant detainees. So the local law enforcement got funding for housing certain immigrants in a section. I remember in Marysville, if anybody's been out there in Sacramento area, I felt like I was in a cowboy town Western movie because way out in Marysville, yes ma'am, no ma'am, with the cowboy hats and the big belts. And I always felt fearful of how they treated me because I was a woman of color, immigration attorney. And, thankfully, those times we were able to go in and we would be in a pod and we would see the detainees. We would be able to represent them. We would be able to prepare them for their court hearings and then show up in court. And so, the world has changed 180 degrees. So coming back to the current situation, there are two purposes behind these mass immigration. One is that's what this administration ran on, mass deportation, deport criminals. And number two, it's a money-making mechanism for private institutions. They need to fill beds. And we're hearing, people being picked up for no criminal record or anything like that. But in my practice nationwide, to give you an example of the kind of clients that we're seeing being picked up, is, for example, if I came into the United States legally through a mechanism, B1 visitor or H1B, and my status has expired or it's still pending, and I get married to a US citizen, through always immigration, the INA codes, my spouse is able to file a petition for me because I legally came in. I get married to a US citizen, therefore I can go through the process and eventually be able to get a green card. Well, just simple process of that is in jeopardy because we've seen in Santa Ana and LA that ICE comes from upstairs and picks them up because they overstayed their visas. And so when people tell me, "Oh, Mrs. Nasiri, you must be very busy." The opposite, actually. Most immigration attorneys have, unless you're doing massive habeas corpus petitions or removal defense, the rest of it has sort of dwindled down for many people. Immigration, I would say 70 to 80% of people are fearful to file. That includes victims of crime. So in the Tri-Valley, I do a lot of U visas for victims of crime, domestic violence, sexual assault, T visas for human trafficking, VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. People are afraid to file for petitions because now this administration has said that if they deny your petition, they will put you in the removal proceedings. Fortunately, in California and Northern California, we have not seen people being picked up at their biometrics. We have not seen people being picked up at the interview if they're just clean, straightforward cases. But in Santa Ana and LA and Texas and in other states, we are seeing individuals being picked up. Now, so when someone gets picked up, it's very difficult to access them. So if somebody gets picked up here, they'll go to Bakersfield or LA area, and then they're sent out to Louisiana, one of the largest facilities under the Reagan administration that was built. And then after 9/11, it was expanded and a large number of Muslims were being held there. So the game that they're playing, just like the previous speaker was talking about, is we don't have numbers. We don't get access to our clients. So someone may have a legitimate case and then they may be able to file some sort of a petition. But if they come into ICE custody, they end up in far states where it's very, very difficult to access them. Sometimes it takes a couple of days to access that individual. So, for example, as a private practitioner, I don't have the ability to fly out to Louisiana or Texas or New Jersey. And so I have to, rapidly find a colleague who's willing to go out there and co-counsel with them. So it's really catastrophic. So those are the type of clients that we see. The other type of clients that I see is, for many of you, as you're aware, after August 21st, 2021, with the fall of the Kabul to the Taliban, the U.S. government under the Biden administration brought in over 200,000 Afghans, paroled in with the understanding that they were allies who served alongside our government, that they would eventually be promised a pathway. Well, not under this administration. It is beyond heartbreaking. Last year, what this administration was doing, for example, if somebody came in, so a lot of Afghans allies who were not able to come in through the evacuation and be paroled in, they came in through the southern border. They didn't come in illegally. They sought asylum. They were brought in. They were in removal proceedings applying for asylum for a short period of time. Believe it or not, this is what they were doing. I came in through the southern border. I've applied for asylum, and you go through a couple of master hearings, just like a regular hearing, and then eventually you'll have your individual hearing, which is the removal, defense, deportation hearing. So I show up for my master hearing, and the government attorney tells the judge, Your Honor, we are going to dismiss the removal proceedings. We don't want to remove this person. The judge says, okay, I'm going to drop the case. Now that individual, like myself, has lost the ability to fight my case in court. As soon as I walked out, ICE detained me. And they're in Bakersfield. They were doing that for a short period of time. Now, for those Afghans who came in through the parole, their avenues was either applying for asylum or the special immigrant visas, which is for translators and allies who supported the government over the 20 years of war in Afghanistan. That has been significantly impacted by the travel bans. There are 39 countries on the travel ban right now, including 19 countries, which includes Afghanistan. So if you've applied for asylum, if you've applied to get your green card, if you've applied to renew your work permit, a work permit is the lifeline for these Afghans who are struggling to feed their children. To this day, as we're speaking, it's all halted. So nationals of 19 countries, including Afghanistan and those allies that came in, they are not able to not only continue their applications here. If I'm a U.S. citizen and I want to apply for my parents, my fiance, my spouse, or anybody else, we cannot bring anybody in. And that also has 75 countries, which includes the 39 countries in it, where no one from those countries can come in. And so who can come in, seek asylum, or come into the United States? The Afrikaners. Right now, they're the only ones that are able to come in. So the system, when you want to do it right under this administration, has been halted. For those who are critical of the policies in the Middle East, and for those who are advocating their right to speak, many are being detained and blacklisted. And so we have individuals like Mahmoud Khalil, who has never been charged of anything, a lawful permanent of the United States, regardless of your opinion, but under the Constitution, he has a First Amendment right, and he is fighting tooth and nail for his deportation. And we have many like him being held. So I know Kyoko asked me to give an overview of like the type of clients we're seeing and the devastation of the policies that are impacting people every single day. I will give you a short, and I know my time is up, but I want to give a short 30-second. I speak Pashto and Dari. My name Spojmie means moon in Pashto. So whenever someone Afghan sees my name, they know I'm Afghan. I got a call from a young gentleman in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Now I said, okay, and he's whispering. And I said, why are you whispering? And he's speaking to me in Pashto, and he said, "You don't know what took me to find your number, but my dad and my mom are here, and they want to ask you something." I said, "Okay." Now, mind you, they got evacuated. They're lawful permanent residents. They hadn't left their home for a month, and the father was depressed because he couldn't go to the Jummah Friday prayers. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "We're afraid ICE is going to come get us because we heard ICE is picking up Afghans after the shooting that happened in DC." So I had to spend time to comfort this person and say, "Do you have any criminal record? Is anything going on?" And they're like, "Oh, no, 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 no. We just pray. We just go to school. We just work." And I said, "I assure you that your father can go to Jummah prayers. Friday prayers is our holy day." And so Sacramento and the Central Valley houses a lot of Afghans, and they are living in very uncertain and difficult times because they were promised to come into the United States, but those promises have been broken under this administration. My Hispanic Latino clients, which make about 70%, are afraid to file applications when they've been victims of crime, sexual assault, if they've been wronged at their work because they haven't been paid, or any other type of case that they're legally entitled to. So overall, the American Bar Association, which I'm a part of the Immigration Commission, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, we continue the fights. We were successful in being able to get the birthright, the hope is there. The Dorcas International case that came out a month or so ago, a couple of weeks ago, what that pertained to was that the federal court in Massachusetts stated that the USCIS was violating the Constitution in the INA by not granting those 39 countries to continue their processes here. But now that has been appealed. So until there's further litigation, individuals who have filed for green card in the United States, for a work permit, for asylum, for any kind of a relief are all halted. And a lot of people don't realize that that is the policies of this administration. But, like the speaker before said, we have to keep hope alive. And I want to just end it with, I am a child who grew up without a mom when I was 5 to 12 years old. My father was struggling to make ends meet. And why I'm here today is because the Catholic Church in Orinda had sponsored my family to come to the US. And the elderly couple, until they passed away in their late 90s, were pivotal to the success in my education, to my siblings and myself, who we are today. And I share that because many of you, Caucasian, many people across the country, you are the voice that's giving hope to many people of color, because when we fight that battle, we see more harsher, and our voices are not heard. So, collaboration and network building, having, working with people of other faiths and other colors, and supporting coalitions who are doing the advocacy, and also supporting candidates coming up in the election who are voicing for the rights of immigrants, and what this administration is doing to democracy and the Constitution in this country. So I can't say with words enough to say how grateful I am to have allies from so many different backgrounds and so many different faces, and to know that there's so much more good in this country than there is what we see every day. And so I'm grateful for Kyoko for giving me the space. I hope I covered everything, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you so much, Spojmie. Do we have any questions in the chat? Not seeing any. Let's see. Nelson mentioned that he was also in Marysville at his second home there, and had that Yuba County Jail had a cooperation with ICE as a detention center at the time, and Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity was instrumental in helping getting that disbanded, those type of cooperations. that is another member of the ICE Out of Dublin coalition that we work with, a very instrumental group, Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. So here's a question. How do you, how are you and your group funded? And are there avenues to make donations?
So I am a private attorney. I'm in Pleasanton. My office is over by Stone Ridge Mall. There are many organizations that a majority of my work, I do 2 to 3 Zoom presentations all across the country, both in English, Pashto, Dari, and if I do it in Spanish, I have my assistant or someone translate. It's all pro bono. I belong to many different organizations. Happy to offline like suggest some that are doing a lot of wonderful work in this space. But I'm a private attorney, and so a lot of my time now, I mean, as always, as Kiyoko's known me for years, and a few others in the space, it's all pro bono. I do it pro bono, so thank you for that. And in terms of resources, there was a package that we had. It was from the Immigrant Legal. So the one organization I could suggest if someone wants to donate is the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, ILRC, and I'll put it in the chat when I find it. They have a family preparedness packet, and I know that we had talked about it in some other spaces. The family preparedness packet, I think, is wonderful in the sense that you can bring together all the documents, because the most critical thing is if somebody gets detained and you can't access their documents, their passports, their birth certificates, and all of that, then you're scrambling to rather than focusing on the individual. So ILRC, and they have it both in Spanish.
Yeah, they're the group where we get the red cards from.
Yeah, they have a family preparedness. They have a family preparedness plan, a packet, a step-by-step package. I'll just put in the link. Another organization is, and I have to find it and I'll put in the chat, it's an app by Human Rights First. And you can upload all of your documents. It's all confidential, it's all secure. And that so if I'm doing it, then I would designate Dan or Kyoko or someone. And if something happens to me, then that can be activated where that person has access to all my documents. Then they're very secure. So I think that's I'll find it right now and then I'll put it into the chat box. I think that's really helpful. And then also obviously the local rapid response notifying. I mean, every day I get people, they tell me, I had a client last week and they were hiding in way in the back of the Costco in Livermore. And I said, what's going on? And he's whispering again. And he said, I see ICE officers in here. I said, well, they're probably in the Santa Rita Detention Center or, FCI is not there anymore, but Santa Rita Detention Center. So if you're fearful, just wait. And so if you see people, then maybe report them to the rapid response. I think, like the previous speaker was talking about, it's really important to be prepared in terms of like having a plan and also letting people know, to save money. The other thing I would suggest is that there are a handful of organizations. I know a couple in Central Valley and others who are doing the habeas corpus petitions. The state of California has provided some funding to be able to do the habeas, to be able to get people out really quick. And so for those who have an attorney, they have a lot more chances of being able to get out of detention and continue and fight their case than those who don't have attorneys, because we have people sitting in Bakersfield for months on end.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Spojmie, and we'll look forward to the information that you will share with us on those resources.
Yeah, I'm going to find it and I'll put it in the chat box, Ronette. Thank you so much, everyone,
Great.
for your time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. At this time, we will shift to our next speaker. Our next speaker, I've had the pleasure of working with. She's a member of the ICE Out of Dublin coalition, and this really ties into what Girsea was saying earlier, and we learned about this at the first Immigration Summer Justice series. get involved, get to know the organizations in your locality who are fighting for immigrant rights and immigrant justice. And that group in our area has been this ICE Out of Dublin coalition. And a key member of this ICE Out of Dublin coalition is Kim Wu, who is here to speak to us today. Kim is with SIREN. SIREN stands for Services, Immigrants, Rights, Education Network. She's based in San Jose, and she's been instrumental in our campaigns that many of you were involved with recently at the City of Dublin resolution and at the response to the environmental assessment. Kim organized all those power hours presentations. And Kim also is very involved in the Gilroy fight. So she's here to give us an update on both of those today. Take it away, Kim Wu.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dan, for the kind introduction. Really nice to see amazing faces. Really also want to shout out Dan, Kyoko, and Liz for being just huge powerhouses within the space. For our friends, Dan and Liz have been so important to like connecting with the elected officials at Dublin in order to pressure them to pass the resolution. And Kyoko has also been so amazing at helping us organize all the mobilized like tech stuff for the power hours. So just want to shout you all out too. I do have a presentation. I'm trying to see if I can. Okay, so I can share the screen. So I'm going to share a screen. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. You can interrupt me because I'm not able to see the chat, or we could do questions at the end. Either way works.
We'll do questions at the end, Kim. I'll be looking at them in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so as Dan said, I'm a community organizer from SIREN, which stands for Services, Immigrant Rights, and Education Network. It's a really long name, so the acronym definitely helps. We serve our immigrant and refugee communities in the Bay Area and in Central Valley through San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, as well as Fresno and Madero counties. We do that through 4 different ways, which is like direct legal services. So we do represent clients on that front. We also do civic engagements. We do a lot of get out the vote work, community empowerment. So we have like impacted adult leaders program and also like youth activists as well. And the last space is policy advocacy, which is really my expertise. So today I'm going to talk to you about ICE Out of Dublin, ICE Out of Gilroy. Thank you for having me in this space. I am one of the few people in the whole Bay Area who's part of the strategy teams for both of these coalitions. So I'm fairly apprised to like nearly everything that's going on the background for both of these. So today I'm just going to talk about what is the difference between Dublin and Gilroy and where the statuses are currently at. I also want to make a note that this presentation was made in collaboration with the Santa Clara County Rapid Response Network and CADAS, which I'll mention later, who is a really prominent nonprofit immigrant rights organization in Gilroy. So hopefully by the end of today, you can understand the difference between ICE processing and ICE detention. I do understand there's a lawyer on the call, so really appreciate if there's like any kind of legal questions. I am myself not a lawyer, so maybe we might be able to tag team on those. Again, after this, hope that you can understand the differences and similarities between what's happening in Gilroy and what's happening in Dublin, and also take concrete actions for the next step. I will say this will not be recorded, so I do see that there was a recording. I'm wondering if we can like pause it by any chance. I'm happy to share the slides afterwards. So is that a yes to like pause the recording or?